And yeah, and we'll just then wait another minute or so until we get started. You've got some thank yous in the chat. Okay. And I'm going to put the Zoom link in here. Some people asked about that. So yes, Sam, I'm getting that ready for us. And I did send out links to all of the sessions tonight via the announcement. Just that gives people more accessibility to what they can do with the view that they have in Whova. So do you want to? Okay. I'm getting to the right spot. You get to see all the behind the scenes stuff of all the technology stuff. But I think many of you are getting pretty well versed at all this stuff because our jobs have kind of shifted a little bit as we have been needing to quarantine and such for COVID. I know my children's school just got moved virtual just right now, today until after Thanksgiving. So it'll be interesting to see. And I'm getting that link and putting in the chat box if that's helpful for anyone. And it should be in your announcements for the evening as well too, from the session and conference. Okay, I think we're ready to start. So welcome to the Environmental Education Association of Indiana's virtual 2020, Vision 2020 virtual conference. We're so glad that you all were able to make it and join us for this. And this will be recorded and available for 1 year after our conference date. And we'll have a link for the registrants for that within the Whova to see that. It probably should be up tomorrow already. I do want to say thank you to our sponsors, Mary Lee Environmental Learning Center of Goshen College, NIPSCO and NAAEE, and some other private sponsors have helped fund everything that's here, as well as our registration fees and such. So we're very grateful for them to make this happen. And as we started thinking about what we wanted in a conference, the name David Sobel and Rachel Larimer both came up, and the other committee members knew David's name better, just he's been a prolific writer, and then we're all in a treat if you don't know Rachel already. But I did want to share just a little bit about David. He has a new book that just came out called The Sky Above and the Mud Below, Lessons from Nature Preschools and Forest Kindergartners. He's a professor emeritus in the education department at Antioch University, New England, and he is a prolific writer and speaker. I've been able to see him in Chicago on child development and place-based education. We've got some other sessions on place-based education here too. He's has authored at least 8 books and more than 70 articles on children and nature for educators, parents, environmentalists, school administrators. I know I read Beyond Ecophobia in one sitting and just devoured it just like that and was so excited about that. So we're excited to learn from him and have his wisdom and expertise, and looking forward to having him share that with us this evening. So it does look like most everyone's on mute, and you're welcome to use the chat for questions and comments and things like that. And we look forward to this keynote time together with David. So I'm going to turn it on over to you.
Okay, do I need to do anything to put it on speaker view, or are you doing that, Carla?
Well, when you show your screen, you can get started.
Okay.
So
Let's share my screen. Wait a second if I do that.
And I think that people typically can choose what they see if they are using the Zoom link instead of the Whova link. And so I did set it for a speaker on my view, but other people may choose to have it a different view. But yeah.
And what do you see right now?
Your PowerPoint's up. So
okay.
your screen that's not as messy as mine. So
Here we go. So Carla, thanks. I think you're probably doing a monumental job in trying to put this together. It's slightly beyond my capacity at this point to do what you're doing.
I appreciate you doing this, though. It's neat to be able to learn from you at a distance and try some new skills and things with it. So we really appreciate you being here tonight, David.
So, and I want to thank all the Indiana environmental educators for the work that you're doing in spite of the current pandemic to counteract the indoorification and the digitalization of children's lives. So whenever you're doing to kind of give kids the opportunity to be in the natural world, it's great. We ought to be able to, as much of that as we can do, the better. So thanks for doing that piece of it. Before I launch into my topic, which is going to be developing a ladder of environmental responsibility, I want to let you know about a document that might be useful in the work that you're doing. Is my PowerPoint now full screen, Carla?
Yes, it is. Looking forward to it.
Great. So I'm going to make sure I'm going to send a copy of this to Carla if I haven't already. And this is a position statement that we created in Northern New England about outdoor learning opportunities and how outdoor learning makes sense in the time of COVID. And it includes links to a variety of different research documents on why time outdoors protects against virus transmission, why nature-based education provides positive academic outcomes, and why nature-based education provides proven mental health benefits. So I think this is the kind of thing that you can be using if you're a school teacher in your school to advocate for outdoor learning. There's lots of schools in Northern New England that have been almost public schools that have been almost completely outside for the last couple of months. And we're about to do another position statement on outdoor learning in winter. And once that's ready, I'll also forward that to Carla. And then this document also includes links to these couple of movies. I'm going to be showing you tiny little trailers from both of these movies tonight. And I think they're also really useful in terms of advocating for what we all believe in. And if you haven't seen this was a New York Times article within the last week or so, which documents the classrooms without walls thing going on around the country. You know, I think everybody in New England and in other places around the country recognizes that outdoors learning has a moment right now. And so we want to capitalize on that and then also extend it into the post-pandemic era of schooling. Okay, so I'm going to talk about developing a ladder of environmental responsibility. And my big goal here is to talk about how we create education that leads to adults who are environmentally sensitive and environmentally responsible. This is getting done in the form of climate change education. And there are lots of advocates for teaching kids about climate change starting in kindergarten. And I want to temper that idea about how we deal with climate change education and replace it with this notion of developing a ladder of environmental responsibility in elementary schools that I think is more developmentally in line with what we want to, what we all want in terms of children that grow up to be adults that are environmentally responsible. So climate change education came into its own when Al Gore made the Inconvenient Truth movie a long time ago. It's still remarkable to me that even Supreme Court justices don't believe in human-caused climate change, but that's what we're working with. And so what I want to start out with is giving you some video examples of the kinds of climate change education that children are exposed to on a fairly regular basis. So this is a nice little children's book on polar bears. This is a video that we're going to look at right now. Very short. Let's see if I can get to it. Oops, wait a second. First technical glitch. Stop, okay. Carla, do you see the polar bear image?
Yes, we're ready to go with it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm gonna try. I don't think I can back it up, so we're just gonna have to see the end of it. Oh, yes, I can. Okay. Okay, so that image, that little video is supposed to, convince kids that global warming is causing problems for polar bears and they should do something about it. I contend that probably if kids see that, if 6- and 7-year-olds see that, what they're going to feel is that if they're with their mom in the supermarket, they're going to get separated from her and they're going to feel lost and alone. And so this is the kind of thing we want to watch out for with young children. Now, I got involved in this whole climate change education and environmental education issue when should see just a black screen right at the moment. About 20 years ago, and at that point, the issue wasn't climate change education, it was rainforest destruction or the ozone hole or endangered species elimination. And so here's an example that's a little antiquated at this point, but it gets at the kind of environmental education messaging, again, that we expose kids to a lot of the time.
Fenceless they stand in the green, green valley. They cannot hear the approach of the end. United they fall, they cannot stand the mechanized might of humanity. Slowly they come, chainsaws in hand, while the bulldozers rip the roots from the land. slowly transforming the Garden of Eden into the land of the damned. They're chopping down the hillside, down the hillside, down the hillside, down. Nature's retreating, staggered by our blows. Nature is bleeding, bleeding out of control. Nature is bleeding, but will we let her go? Right now nature's dying hard and slow. We're at war with our mother, rocked her down to her knees, relentless.
Okay. A strong message. And if it wasn't clear right there at the end, that was, a shower of blood that covered the screen. Let's see, I'm going to try to get back to my PowerPoint now. So that was chopping down the hillside. If anybody's interested in using that as in your classroom. So that's the kind of message. There's lots of things wrong with it, in addition to the fact that it mixes up a whole lot of species that aren't in the same places at the same time. But it also, and it gives a one-sided perspective on, on rainforest harvesting, and there's a lot of things that are problematic with it. So it was from looking at these kinds of things that I developed the idea of ecophobia. So I want to give you a sense of the origin story of the concept of ecophobia. And so there was a student in one of my graduate courses, and they have to do a piece of research with students that looks at the developmental parameters for curriculum development. And so a student of mine named Steve Moore interviewed 80 children, 80 second graders in the school district that he was in. This is in 4 different classes of second graders. And to interview the kids, what he did was he created a set of about 25 cards. And the cards looked like this: picture of the Earth from space, happy families having a picnic, kids playing sports, cute animal pictures, urban scapes with smokestacks, a kind of wide range of things. And he said, choose a half a dozen cards that show what's important for you as a second grader. And so he did this with all 80 kids. He looked at the patterns, and he found this very interesting bifurcated pattern of responses. To about half the kids, chose the pictures of the cute animals and sports and pets, and said, I like being with my parents, and I like playing with my dog, and I like playing soccer. And they approached the whole completion of the task in a kind of cheery and upbeat fashion. The other half of the kids chose the picture of the Earth from space and the urban scape and some of the wildlife pictures, and said, what's important is taking care of the Earth and saving animals. However, they responded in a kind of defeated, melancholic fashion. And Steve couldn't figure out why it was that half the kids responded one way and half the kids responded this other way. So he went back to the teachers and said, this is what I found, what's going on here? And he said to the teachers, well, last week we did do an Earth Week curriculum project, and the kids seemed really interested in it. And then the other 2 teachers said, oh, gee, and they were kind of apologetic. And they said, gee, we really didn't do any Earth Week curriculum. Gee, we wish we had done that. But the interesting thing was the teachers that did the Earth Week curriculum had the children that responded in a kind of despondent, melancholic, oh, we've got to save the Earth fashion. So what I realized at that point, and then in relationship to other work that I was doing, was that, oh, really well-intentioned teachers are doing curriculum with young children that creates this sense of hopelessness and anxiety. And I thought, okay, there's something, the intentions are good, but the impact on the children might be what we want. And so that's where the concept of ecophobia emerged from. So nowadays, it's climate change education instead of rainforest education that's engendering ecophobia. And so let me give you this example. This is a public service announcement. This is not something that would have been shown to kids, but it illustrates what's going on with kids. So we got to go back out and
There was once a land where the weather was very, very strange. There were awful heat waves in some parts, and in others terrible storms and floods. Scientists said it was being caused by too much CO2, which went up into the sky when the grown-ups used energy. They said the CO2 was getting dangerous. Its effects were happening faster than they had thought. Some places could even disappear under the sea, and it was the children of the land who'd have to live with the horrible consequences. The grown-ups realized they had to do something. They discovered that over 40% of the CO2 was coming from ordinary everyday things like keeping houses warm and driving cars, which meant if they made less CO2, maybe they could save the land for the children.
Is there a happy ending?
It's up to us how the story ends. See what you can do. Search online for ACT on CO2.
okay, so is there a happy ending? And is that the kind of message we want to be giving kids as they go to bed at night? So if we do this over and over again, this is what happens.
The scientific community released a report that proves beyond a doubt that the Earth is getting warmer. This global warming is caused by things you grown-ups do, and by the things you don't. If drastic measures aren't taken soon, by the time I grow up, there won't be any fish left in the sea. Rainforests and clean air will be a thing of the past. Polar ice caps will be gone. Oceans will rise. Entire countries will disappear. Life will change in ways you can't even imagine. There could be famine, worldwide epidemics. Life expectancy will be lower. And we're not just talking about the future. We're talking about my future. But this is no surprise. You adults have known about this for years. And though you could have done something about it, you haven't. You can say, it's not my problem. You can say, I won't be around in 50 years. But from now on, you can't say I didn't know. Starting today, the lines are drawn. You have to choose sides. Either you're for my future, or you're against it. You're a friend, or you're an enemy. I may just be a kid today, but tomorrow will be different. This is the last time I'll be talking to you adults. You've had your chance to fix this problem. Now we have ours. We won't be cute, we won't be patronized, and we will not be denied our future.
So it's actually this kind of a little bit old. It's kind of prescient. If you noticed in the beginning, he said, worldwide epidemics, right? So it's not like I don't agree with this child. What causes me pause is the anger and melancholia of this child. And so I think we can be accomplishing what we want here in a more constructive fashion. So that's where I want to go now. So I'm going to start off with this now a little antiquated, but still really interesting. This great Swiss National Science Foundation study on environmental learning and activism. And so the study compared adults whose knowledge about the environment was based mostly on media presentations about ecological catastrophes versus adults whose knowledge about the environment came from nature experiences and activism. And the author found that environmental behavior is less the result of learning and knowledge and more the result of particular environmental experiences, and that some environmental knowledge does not necessarily translate into more responsible behavior towards the environment and could even be counterproductive. So in other words, too much knowledge might be counterproductive, which is completely contrary to what we assume is the model here. And so here were his findings from this study. He said, nature experiences seem to be a necessary condition for any type of environmentally responsible behavior. In other words, if we want kids that are going to become environmentally responsible adults, they have to have immersion in the natural world kind of experiences. And second, experiences of environmental activism emerge as another crucial condition for any environmental behavior. So that we have to be providing children with experiences with environmental activism. And I'm going to contend that there's a sequence of the kinds of environmental activism that you want to provide for students in a developmentally appropriate fashion. So first, nature experiences got to have saturation in the natural world, experiences of activism. Third, fear and anxiety of environmental problems has the potential to turn environmental education into a counterproductive activity. We can actually turn kids off and make them become less environmentally responsible if we invoke too much fear and anxiety. And fourth, when low fear is involved, environmental knowledge and information do make a difference in terms of environmental behavior. So we got to modulate the fear and provide the right amount of knowledge and the right amount of nature saturation and environmental activism in order to engender the kind of behavior as environmentally responsible adults that we want. Now, there's a variety of other studies that resonate with this Swiss National Science Foundation study. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the work that Louise Chawla has done to review all the autobiographical accounts of environmentalists. And when you look at environmentalists and their experience in childhood, they always talk about two things consistently. Many hours spent outdoors in a keenly remembered wild or semi-wild place, and an adult who taught respect for nature. And environmental education experiences are third or fourth in the list of things that made them become environmentalists. So lots of time outside in a wild or semi-wild place, an adult who modeled respect for nature. This is similar to E.O. Wilson's comment in his autobiography. Hands-on experience at the critical time, not systematic knowledge, is what counts in the making of a naturalist. Better to be an untutored savage for a while and not know the names or anatomical detail. Better to spend long stretches of time just searching and dreaming. So we tend to, start to teach taxonomy with, young kids and get them to, do the cognitive thing where what we really need is, as E.O. Wilson says, better to let kids be untutored savages. Savage, I know, is a loaded, problematic term right now, but you know what he's talking about. Then there's this study that everybody winces at. This was done by a couple of researchers, Nancy Wells and Kristen Leckys at Cornell. And they looked at the relationship on the one hand between nature experiences in childhood and environmentally responsible behavior in adulthood. They did surveys of a couple thousand people around the country. And they divided up the nature experiences in childhood into 3 different categories. One was wild nature play, which was not out of control nature play, but play in wild places. The second kind of nature play was domesticated nature play, which was more 4-H, gardening, animal care. And then the third kind of experience was environmental education experience. And then the adult environmental behaviors were turning off the lights, voting for candidates on the basis of their environmental record, recycling, those kind of standard behaviors. And the surprising finding was that wild nature play correlated with adult environmental attitudes and behaviors. Domesticated nature play correlated with environmental attitudes, but only slightly with environmental behaviors. And environmental education correlated with neither. And everybody in the environmental education community kind of groaned when they saw this study, because it suggested that, if you ask environmental educators what they're trying to do, they're saying we want people to be environmentally responsible citizens. And this suggested that environmental education wasn't necessarily the prime factor in making that happen. Wild nature play, or play in wild places, did seem to make a difference. And so the authors quickly said, we can't really, this doesn't allow us to differentiate between different kinds of environmental education experience. And there's certainly lots of environmental education that does put a premium on play and experiences in wild natural places. There was a similar study by Jim Pease about Iowa farmers. And he looked at 300 farmers, half of whom took advantage of wetland set-aside funding and half of them who didn't. And he contended that the farmers that took advantage of wetland set-aside funding, in other words, take some of your land, don't plant it, leave it for for wildfowl migration, that was an environmental behavior. And so he looked at the childhood experiences of these 2 groups of farmers. And the farmers who took advantage of wetland set-aside funding did hunting and fishing with their parents as kids. They went berry picking and mushroom collecting with their parents. They did a lot of horseback riding. They had access to play in natural areas, and they read books about nature. And so what this is getting down to is that if you're thinking about going to the global warming presentation with your kids or taking them berry picking, the berry picking might be the better option if you want them to grow up to be environmentally responsible adults. So let's go, so now what do we do? Let's first of all look at this notion that the Swiss National Science Foundation study said, saturation in nature, experiences in the natural world have to be an integral part of the experience. Rachel's going to talk much more tomorrow about nature preschools and forest kindergartens. I'm going to show you an extract, a 1-minute trailer for this film called The Best Day Ever. And this film is about forest days in Vermont kindergartens. 1 day a week in public schools in Vermont. And lots of public school kindergarten teachers were up until this year doing this, and now lots of these teachers are now doing every day, or at least a big chunk of every day, outdoors in the forest. So let's just take a quick look at the trailer for this movie. There's something really unusual and interesting going on in the upper Connecticut River Valley in Vermont.
I love the outdoors, I love nature, and I don't care how dirty my kids get, and I kind of believe the dirtier they are, the better.
Outside, you have this complexity in which you are learning. I think that offers the kids a way to grow in a new and important way that the classroom doesn't offer.
Different teachers are trying this in different ways, different schools, recognizing that whatever works is good because children need more nature. That's a given.
Having trouble getting rid of this one. Oh, it's just, there we go. So this is one of the movies that I pointed out in the beginning. This is available for viewing, really useful with parent groups and teacher groups. And some nice research related to this. And there's actually a Forest Days handbook, which is now back in print, that really helps teachers to figure out how to do this in their public school classrooms. So this fulfills the piece of what we were talking about in terms of the Swiss National Science Foundation studies. You got to saturate kids in nature. So the next thing we have to do is figure out, okay, how are we going to provide incremental progressive experiences with environmental activism as part of the school experience? So let me give you some developmental portraits of the progression that we should be seeing in K-6 or K-8 schools. And this is moving us towards this ladder of environmental responsibility. So this is the frontispiece from a book I did called Map Making with Children. And it suggests that if you look at children's maps of their neighborhoods over the years from 4 up to 13, you'll find that their world moves progressively outwards into the community. So the world for 5 and 6-year-olds is the home and school, right? And the world for 7 and 8-year-olds is the neighborhood. The world for 9 and 10-year-olds is the community and watershed. The world for 11, 12 and beyond, up into high school is the nation, region, and beyond. And so what we want to do is start to construct curriculum that honors this kind of movement up and out into the world, as opposed to, I always rail against teaching the solar system in kindergarten as being particularly inappropriate. Here's the adventure education curriculum from the college school, an independent school near St. Louis. And this is particularly good at translating what I just showed you into a curriculum organization. So in kindergarten, kids do a 12-week theme that introduces them to hiking in the out of doors. They go on short walks and then longer walks in parks and nature center, and then eventually do a day-long hike of many miles. In 2nd grade, there's a 6-week unit on doing a camp out for which they have to plan for, and doing all the things they have to do in terms of creating meals and cleaning up and living in the out of doors. So they've gone from hiking to doing a camp out by 2nd grade. By 5th grade, there's a 12-week unit on studying cave formations and cave safety. And I'm not sure they still do this. I know they're not doing this year, but they did this for a long time. And this culminates in a 3-day overnight where students have to backpack and thoroughly explore a single cave. So what's happening here is the challenge is becoming bigger, and you're moving further out into the world, and there's more responsibility that you have to take at each one of these stages. By 6th grade, the kids are doing a 5-day backpacking trip further away, and they're also going to an overnight experience in the state capitol. So there's both natural world and social world experiences, but it's this movement outward into the big world. Here's another, a ladder. This is where one of the places I got this idea. Great book by Roger Hart called Children's Participation Theory and Practice of Involving Young Citizens in Community and Development and Environmental Care. And in it, and this is great because he has, the examples are from basically all the continents around the world. This is a very Western, European, United States kind of based book, but much more multicultural in its orientation. And in it, the text here is hard to see, but the idea is that kids go from 4 years old up to 12 years old. 4-year-olds are responsible for domestic environmental management. 7-year-olds become responsible for local environmental management. By 11, students are more involved in community environmental management. And so it's the same idea of expanding out into the world and up in terms of responsibility. Now, this is mirrored in the pattern in a lot of traditional agrarian cultures, where as kids get older, they become responsible for taking care of larger and larger animals. So 5 and 6-year-olds responsible for a chicken, 7 and 8-year-olds more responsible for a lamb or a goat, and 10, 11, 12-year-olds responsible for cows. This is, I'm sure this is very much like what happens in 4-H. And it's the same kind of thing, increasingly substantial responsibility for a larger creature or a larger scope. So if we put all that stuff together, then you get to the idea of the ladder of environmental responsibility. And so this is Rachel Carson Elementary School. I know there are some Rachel Carson Elementary Schools, but this is a fabricated one. And so this is, in abstraction, not a specific school, but my idea of the idea. And what you would do is, at each grade level, you would have the expectation that there was a certain caretaking of the environment, of the school environment, by the children and the teachers at that grade level. So kindergartners would be responsible for seasonal school beautification, the changing displays in the front entranceway of whatever was flowering that week, or fall mushrooms or winter twigs. The first graders would be responsible for maintaining the flower gardens, second graders the vegetable gardens, the third graders the schoolyard. Here you start to get more complicated management. How do we keep the schoolyard clean? How do we deal with graffiti and vandalism? How do we help teach schoolyard games? How do we keep the bird feeders full? By 4th grade, you have the 4th grade teachers and students running the school recycling programs. I saw great, for instance, in a 4th grade in a school in Boston one year, where the principal said to the 4th grade teacher and students, we have an abysmal rate of recycling of paper in the school. I want you 4th graders to come up, design a better recycling program, and do the public education with all the other kids in the school on how the recycling program is going to work. And so it was both, they had to figure out the program and they had to figure out how to do the public education piece of it. In Rachel Carson School, in my mind, the 5th graders would tend the composting program. The 6th graders would start to be the climate change team. So we haven't been talking about climate change with kids in the earlier grades, but by 6th grade, you want to start talking about it. And so here the 6th graders would be responsible for, figuring out how to monitor the carbon dioxide output and figuring out how to reduce electricity or decrease the amount of fuel being used or decrease the water consumption. That becomes those kinds of sophisticated problems, but on a local school level, become appropriate at that age. So 4th graders running the school recycling program. So here's a, for instance, of a draft of, and I'm not quite sure how much this got implemented, but it was being developed a few years back for the Fairfax County Public Schools in Virginia. And so it's the same, there's nothing specific about the task that has to be allocated to the grade level other than, you want early, easier, smaller scope tasks for younger kids and more complicated, bigger tasks for older kids. So butterfly related gardening and maintenance wasn't something I had thought about, but that's a great task for 2nd graders. And then same kind of thing with increasing systems, bigger systems management as the kids move up into 5th and 6th grade. And then in a lot of Fairfax County public schools, there's an eco school team, and the eco school team can be more responsible for the big picture thinking and figuring out what the yearly challenge is going to be. So the idea here is that you figure out how to build into the school system this expectation that as you grow older, you become responsible for some aspect of making the school a more environmentally responsible institution and place. And you want to do it in these incremental steps along the way. So that achieves what the Swiss National Science Foundation study said about, opportunities for environmental activism. However, you also don't want to lose the saturation in the natural world aspect up through the grades as well. So what I want to do is show you again now the trailer for this film called Turning School Inside Out, which is about K-8 nature-based education in one New Hampshire public school. So this is a relatively small 200 kid K-8 public school, not very far from Keene where I am. And let's look at that trailer.
When you take teaching outside, when you take the learning outside, children learn things on their own. Teaching outside, when you take the learning outside, children learn things on their own. It's out there for them.
Yeah, I get about 1.5 inches heel to toe. Yeah, I get about
I wish we could go out every day and do something on the land. I wish we could go out every day.
Nothing that can replace, seeing it with your own eyes, having that hands-on experience. Nothing that can replace, seeing it with your own
David,
eyes.
it does seem like that maybe 2 copies are running of the sound.
For our state if it became more wide scale.
You're right. Let's see if we can try that again and have it not be quite so distracting.
When you take teaching outside, when you take the learning outside, children learn things on their own. It's out there for them.
I get about 1.5 inches heel to toe.
I wish we could go out every day and do something on the land.
Make sure that it does not line.
There's nothing that can replace, seeing it with your own eyes and having that hands-on experience, I think, becomes more concrete. It becomes real for them.
I mean, I feel like this could be transformative for our state if it became more wide scale.
Yay.
I think that we have only scratched the very surface of what this could possibly blossom into.
So again, this film is now available and really useful in professional development for staff development experiences in school, or if you're advocating for K-8 nature-based education, it's really useful. This is a pretty straightforward, conventional public school, not a public school that we expected for this to happen in. So it's easy to say, oh, well, that's kind of a hip community. It can never happen in our school, but that's the kind of school that this was before this started happening there. So let me wrap this all up with one last video. Again, a little antiquated at this point, but it really does weave together all the things that we've been talking about. The problems of curriculum invoking ecophobia and trying to come up with the kind of appropriate experience in the natural world and environmental activism that really engenders continuing development of environmental responsibility. This is from a program called, let's get back here. A program called STRAW, Students and Teachers Restoring a Watershed. And it's mostly done in the northern Bay Area in California, in Marin County and Sonoma, that area.
In 1992, I was teaching 4th grade, and I showed a video on endangered species and watched my students sink low.
See if I can get this. No. Here we go.
In 1992, I was teaching 4th grade, and I showed a video on endangered species and watched my students sink lower and lower in their seats until it was done. And then one boy raised his hand and he said, "Mrs. Rogers, what can we do to help endangered species?" And that's when I looked at him and I knew I couldn't say, let's write letters or let's do a study, that we really needed to do something big.
Ready? Wiggle and up.
Nice.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. Push.
Good.
And then wiggle.
I was a little taken aback. I wasn't quite sure, if I wanted to have a bunch of school kids coming out and running around on my property.
Freshwater shrimp, what's that little thing? I never saw one of those. Who cares?
The last one. 1, 2, 3.
I don't think there's a lot of learning, especially with children this age, unless they're actually doing the projects themselves.
Can you get in one more inch? Perfect. That's going to be a happy little tree. Okay.
Step on the outside.
Many times they'll say the work was hard, but it was fun. And then I'll ask them, well, why did we do this today? What was the point of all this hard work? And they'll say, to help animals.
Okay. Yeah. What kind of plants do you really eat?
We got the idea to adopt a species, the California freshwater shrimp, and brainstormed ways to help them. And one of the best ways to help them was to restore their habitat.
The very first time the kids came out, we were really unorganized. We really didn't know what we were getting into. I don't think the kids knew what they were getting into. It was really fun. We had a great time.
And to tell you the truth, Paul has tremendous courage. And so he took a chance on us. Everything bloomed from there.
So what started on Paul Martin's ranch is one restoration that was done 15 years ago and now is a virtual forest, is now being connected one landowner at a time up and down that watershed. The entire 2 miles of creek has been revegetated by kids.
These things will probably come up to here in 5 years. Some of the willows will probably be really high because they grow fast.
I just go crazy when people say something like it's a cute project or a feel-good project. That makes me go crazy. I think one of the most important things about the project is that we take the work seriously and we take the students seriously.
Don't pull this down, don't pull it. Pull it back. Here it comes. Push. Oh, good.
You can point to streams that they started 10 years ago in the straw program that now have a full canopy of oaks and cottonwoods and maple trees all over them that started with little sticks in the ground.
When we first started, there was only 4 or 5 species of birds that lived out in the creek. And from what I understand, the last survey they did, there was 28 different species out there.
The straw children that come and do the plantings are just really integral to our feeling that we're part of a bigger community.
What do you think of this project? It's wonderful. It's fun.
Straw is a community program, but it also puts schools as hubs of community. The dedication comes from the context that's created in the classroom.
To have them actually outside in the environment, seeing what I'm talking about is what's going to stay with them forever.
We actually did a survey of the original kids as they were leaving college, and they do have a true feeling of empowerment. That they actually said, many of them, that it could be traced back to their 4th grade experience.
Some people in the world might be lazier than others, so we have to do it or else most people wouldn't do it.
This will follow them through life. They've made a difference here, and they'll know that they can make a difference in lots of different areas. And that's really what I think the most important thing that we're giving them, is that they're going to be able to hold on to that feeling of empowerment.
So think back to the child, the teenager with the hoodie and the kind of melancholic approach towards climate change, and compare that with the kids at the end of this video who were kind of joyous.
David, did your speaker or volume change at all? I'm not sure. It's just a little bit harder to hear you.
I'll get closer. How about now?
Yeah, that's better. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I was just back from, yeah, so think about that child in the beginning who was melancholic with the hoodie and kind of dark, and then the children in this video who were upbeat and enthusiastic, and as the teachers say towards the end, empowered. And I love the comment about, interviewing these kids after they graduated from college and saying they could, their environmental impulses dated back to their 4th grade experience. And so if we manage to create schools as communities of environmental care, then we're going to have kids, and they incrementally take on responsibility up through the grades and in a developmentally appropriate fashion. Then when they get to be teenagers or adults, then they're going to be able to take on the more complex problems of how do we live when we're faced with a pandemic, and how are we going to deal with the climate change problems that are shaping all of our lives. And so we don't want to impose that in a heavy-handed way too early, but we want to start to engage kids in environmental care, environmental activism in progressive ways up through the grades. And that's what I'm hoping for with this notion of a ladder of environmental responsibility. And then I'm going to end with this quote from my daughter. This is not a picture of my daughter, but the quote is from my daughter. and she wrote this in a letter to her mom and I when she was about 20 years old, referring to how we had parented her. And she said, "This connection to the earth, which is everywhere and always nurturing, is one of the greatest gifts I've ever received. It allows me to feel at home anywhere that I can plant my feet in the soil and hug the trees, and it helps me to find solitude and peace within myself and the world around me." And so that's what I think is important, both this sense of internal sense of satisfaction and integrity and a connectedness to the natural world, which engenders with that concurrent sense of environmental responsibility. So thanks for bearing with me and my little technological glitches. It was fun to do that. So I'm finished, Carla.
Thank you so much. The earlier videos that you were showing as perhaps not the way to go were really leaving me a little depressed. And these ones with your laddered approach just leave me with a little bit more hope. And so I hope that that same view is similar to that. And I mentioned in the chat that Paul Story had done a session this morning about kind of that incremental approach that he's written a curriculum for one of our local schools in Indiana, starting with nature play, that wild nature play, and moving on up to more responsibility and that laddered approach. And so that will be available for the participants of the conference probably tomorrow morning, though we've got lots more sessions tomorrow, so you've got a year to watch these and such. And we also mentioned that we might need to look up some of the titles of the movies that you mentioned and documentaries, and go ahead and maybe have a watch party or something like that as a follow-up to the conference too. I think that would be really good. So yeah, thanks for the great ideas. And let's see, do you have a couple of minutes for questions if people have any questions? Okay, so as far as participants go, if you all have something that you'd like to share, you're welcome to unmute yourself and or type it in the chat and I can read it. And David, just so that you know, in the chat, there's a lot of thank you, inspiring, super inspiring, thanks. It's lovely to see, hear you. I'm here with one of my graduate students carrying it all on, you know, and so very powerful. And just this tribute that your daughter wrote, or said, and just shows that power of how grounding people with the earth can be so much more powerful than scaring us about the future. And we do need to eventually step into that activist role and take our part of what we can do to help with this issue after we've developed that connection. I think you've said it, you know, we have to teach children to love the earth before we can ask them to save the earth, kind of thing. And so, yeah.
Exactly.
So if anybody's got a question, they're welcome to unmute and ask away and or use the chat feature.
I always like to say, Carla, people don't have to have a question to say something. You know, they can say, gee, we were doing something like this in our school last year before the pandemic struck, and it made me realize what a good thing it was that we were doing it. And I think it's important to recognize that we will be back to doing this kind of in the natural world kind of experience with teachers and kids at some point, even though it may not be happening that much right now.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder. And I like what you said about, it doesn't have to be a question, it can just be a comment and such. I'll go with a question. People know I have lots of questions. So you did mention kind of COVID and the pandemic. I know my kids are going virtual. Do you have any advice for educators and people who work with educators and environmental educators for still allowing that connection to nature during this downtime? I know that there have been a lot of sales on bicycles and kayaks and those kinds of things, but how can we use our force as an educator or environmental educator to encourage that nature connection during this kind of downtime?
Yeah, I mean, what's been happening in New England is, so I'm on the board of a conservation organization called the Harris Center, and there's a staff of about a half a dozen educators that consistently work with, you know, dozens of different schools and classrooms. And a lot of those schools have created outdoor facilities, so tented facilities for kids to be outdoors. And so the kids are out in these tented facilities, but the teachers don't want to just do sitting at desks outdoors. They want to take advantage of being outdoors. And so the naturalists and the educators at the Hare Center have become the staff development experts on, oh, okay, now that you're outdoors, this is what you can do. So I think that if schools are pivoting to outdoors, then environmental educators have to be the people that can say, oh, okay, now that you're out here, this is what you can do. And we've been doing some ongoing programming outdoor, appropriately social distanced, because there's not a lot of accounts of transmission of the virus in outdoor settings. If kids are outdoors and wearing masks, there's not much evidence that there's much transmission. There's a really great CDC article this summer or this fall about 4 main summer camps that managed to run residential summer camps by having really good protocols, and so allowing kids to have the traditional summer camp experience and not have virus transmission. So it is doable. And so environmental educators have to help advocate for that mindset.
Thank you. And we do have Rachel Larimore speaking tomorrow afternoon. Is more of a workshop of kind of those nuts and bolts of how do you make it happen outside, if that's of interest to people. And then there are some schools, there's another school that is sharing on Sunday morning, and it's a co-op in Carmel that instead of being inside for their group, they've just kind of taken it outside. And so they'll share some of their tips and tricks with that too, if that's helpful for anyone. And it seems like it's been harder for public schools to kind of make that shift, but it seems like there's a school in Kokomo that has done more of that outside education with it. And I hope that all of us can just take away from this that there are ways to make it happen, and we can be advocates for change and see that how we might play a role in encouraging our formal educators and educational institutions to have more of that outdoor education and exploration time with that as well. So.
All right.
Thank you so much for your time tonight. I don't see any other questions, but if someone has something, feel free. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to chime in really quickly. My name is Shelby Porteroff. Hi, David. I just wanted to go ahead and thank you. One of your former master's students, actually, who is my professor, Dr. Brian Forrest, connected me to your readings well before I was here to join you this evening. So I have you actually to thank for a lot, including the first job that I ever landed in this field. I did an education activity for K through 6th grade age range that was based around your Look, Don't Touch piece. So I kind of designed like a little quick engagement activity that focused on pollination and using like bumblebees to pollinate flowers and things like that. So that was actually inspiration from you. So thank you for that. It helped me land a job. But I wanted to ask, what is your advice when informal education centers are partnering with public schools and public schools are really heavily leaning into this idea of climate change curriculum for K through 6th grade ages? Because I taught at MCCSC public schools through Wonder Lab Museum, which is a nonprofit and informal education center. But the public schools really wanted us to try to champion some climate change education, including with those really younger ages. And so kind of hearing you talk, I worried about, some of the stuff that we discussed with those kids and how it maybe sat with them. And I think there were a lot of positive yields, like they started composting at their schools and recycling at a couple of the places we were at during our curriculum. But I also know, apologize for that. I was getting a phone call. I know there also were probably some things that maybe didn't sit super well with those kids that I now get to reflect on. So what is your advice for that kind of a situation?
Yeah, it goes back to the Swiss National Science Foundation study, is that you just have to kind of modulate the amount of fear and anxiety that's being conveyed by the adults to the kids. And when you modulate that, when the focus is on developing environmental good habits. I mean, you know, this is what we have to do. This is going to make things work better. It doesn't have to be within the context of, you know, we've got 10 years before all the icebergs melt and, you know, where the flood is moving up the Mississippi River. So it's fine to have a climate change curriculum as long as you just don't overdo the big scale understanding why climate change is happening with young kids, and you focus on the doing good work aspect of it.
Thank you so much.
Sure. And if you ever see Brian, give him my regards.
He's here
tonight.
us. Brian, you want to say hi?
Hi, David.
Hey, Brian.
It's great to see you.
Yeah. That's
Cool.
great. Oh, there he is.
Second generation.
Right. Brian and I participated in some great theatrical events together.
Cool. Now we want to see those recordings. And someone else said something, I think, right?
Oh, I think I said the same thing as you about seeing those recordings.
That would be great. So, cool. Well, thank you everyone so much. It's been a pleasure to have David here for our keynote speaker tonight, and hopefully it has some information to mull over and think about. He is doing a session in the morning too, as around his new book about nature preschools and forest kindergarteners. So that may be of interest as well. There are also many sessions that are kind of related to some of these concepts, like partnerships and getting funding for some of these things, initiatives that we might want to see. So I encourage you to look at the schedules and go ahead and start seeing what you might want to do. As I sent out as an announcement earlier, for more functionality within the Zoom sessions, you may want to come directly into Zoom as opposed to through the Whova app. I went ahead and sent out with an announcement those links for the sessions tonight, and I will go ahead and do that for the sessions tomorrow, probably later this evening as well, so that you can have those direct links to those Zoom meetings if that's helpful for you. And if you don't want to kind of do any of the advanced features and stuff, it's fine to do it through the Whova app. It totally works fine. But if you want some more advanced functionality through it, you may want the Zoom link as well. So we do have coming right up right after this is our EEAI Has Talent Showcase. Paul Surrey, he's leading that for us. He does a great job with it every year. And he models that stair-step ladder approach to environmental education with that, not only in a professional realm, but also with his own boys. His boys are teenagers now, and they are great advocates for the environment. And I know that that modeling from Paul has made a big influence on that. So let's go ahead and give a round of applause to David, and thank you so much for your time. And we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. And then head on over to the Has Talent Showcase. So thank you very much. I'm seeing some hands go up and some clapping and all those kinds of things all over, David. So we appreciate it so much. So,
Carla.
okay, thanks. Bye, everyone. See you soon.